Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Councillor Steve Pitt, I'm the leader of Portsmouth City Council and the chair of this meeting. Bit of housekeeping before we start. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room by the public gallery and the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble in the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the Park building. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those explicitly stating they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones, and please remember to switch them off when you have finished. We've all read the reports, but I'm going to ask Natalie to introduce it shortly. We'll begin, however, with introductions around the room so that everybody knows who everyone is. Starting to my left, please, Peter.
Peter Wolf, City Solicitor, thank you.
Natalie Brommer-Pearl, Chief Executive.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Mythe, Councillor St Jude Ward, not on the Cabinet.
Mary Vallely, Casham and Wimmering, not on the Cabinet.
Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, Leader of the Labour Group, not on the Cabinet.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Mark Jeffrey, Councillor for St Thomas Ward, not on the Cabinet.
Councillor Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Greening the City.
Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environmental Services.
Councillor George Magical, Paulsgrove Ward, not on the Cabinet.
Peter Candlish, Cabinet Member for Transport.
I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Sport and Open Spaces. I'm also the Councillor for Nelson Ward, which covers Stamshaw, Tipner, Buckland and North End. Thank you, Chair.
Good evening, Chair. Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Central Services.
Matthew Williamson, Cabinet Member for Community Wellbeing, Health and Care.
And I'm Darren Sanders, I'm the Deputy Leader, and I'm also the Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness.
Welcome, everyone, and also welcome to Toby, the local democracy reporter from the news today. We have a couple of apologies for absence from Cabinet members, Councillor Susie Horton, who is on leave, and Councillor Hugh Mason, who is also on planned leave. Can I just say, before we go any further, I've never heard so many people proud of the fact that they're not on the Cabinet. It's the most extraordinary thing. But it caught on, I guess. So welcome and thanks for being here today. We do have some deputations, so what I'm going to do is I'll ask Natalie to present the report, and then we'll do your deputations, and then we'll go into debate from there. So that you've heard that first. So I'm expecting there to be deputations from Councillor Charlotte Gerarda and George. Are you making it down? Councillor George Madgwick on behalf of the Labour and Portsmouth Independent Party groups, respectively. Any declarations of interest, colleagues? No. Okay. In which case we come to item 3, which is the Hampshire and Solent Devolution Agreement and Local Government Reorganisation. So I'm going to ask Natalie Brommer-Pearl, the Chief Executive of Portsmouth City Council, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is for Cabinet to consider proposals regarding Portsmouth City Council's participation in securing a devolution arrangement for the city, along with the rest of Hampshire upper tier authorities. And this follows our joint expression of interest that was submitted at the end of August last year. 3 weeks ago, the government published its long-awaited white paper, which is focused on devolution and local government. And within this white paper, ambitions for devolving powers across England were also referenced. So from the devolution proposals, it is expected that additional resources will flow into the area from a devolution deal to deliver transport and local infrastructure, unlock housing and economic growth, drive environmental change and build capacity for skills and employment opportunities. In this regard, the Cabinet is being asked to agree for Portsmouth to submit to the Government our request, along with the 3 upper-tier authorities across Hampshire, to be considered to be part of the Devolution Priority Programme. This needs to be made by the deadline of this Friday, the 10th of January, which, if successful, would put us in the first tranche of new devolution arrangements going forwards. By agreeing and supporting the devolution priority programme, this will trigger the establishment of a new strategic authority which will be overseen by an elected mayor, with those elections planned to take place in 2026. In addition to this, and which will run in parallel with it, is the local government reorganisation proposals. This is the biggest overhaul for local government since 1974, with the abolishment of county councils and district and borough councils, the two-tier system. And these will be replaced across England with unitary authorities. Cabinet are also asked to note this process, whilst this process will run, it is separate to the devolution process, but it will run in parallel with a parallel timetable, with new indicative structures being submitted to the government in March, followed by detailed arrangements in the autumn, and they are expected to take effect in 2027-2028. For Portsmouth, whilst we are already a unitary authority, we have been informed by MHCLG that we must grow in size to achieve efficiencies, improve our capacity and withstand financial shocks. So to do so, we need to grow our population to approximately 500,000 people, and this will lead to the formation of a new, bigger unitary authority incorporating the district and boroughs around us. Given the intensive period of discussions and negotiations, Cabinet is asked for delegated authority to the leader and myself as Chief Executive to negotiate terms and arrangements on behalf of the Council going forwards. We will arrange regular member briefings to keep councillors up to date and bring decisions back to Cabinet and full Council as appropriate. Any questions we're happy to take, and Paddy May is also here, who's been working on it with me.
Okay, if we go to the deputations next, Charlotte, would you like to go?
Thank you, Chair and Leader, and thank you for giving group leaders the opportunity to come here and present back from our groups about the devolution proposals. So, after reviewing the English devolution paper, receiving an all-councillor briefing and discussing the plans with my Labour councillor colleagues, I'm proud to speak in favour of the recommendations to Cabinet for Portsmouth City Council to pursue being part of the National Devolution Priority Programme. We welcome the government's English Devolution Bill White Paper because it aims to deliver the biggest transfer of power out of Westminster to England's regions for a century, to raise living standards and deliver better services across every region in the country. England is one of the most centralised countries in the developed world, and these devolution proposals seek to change that. When I reflect on the biggest challenges for our city, from averting climate catastrophe, transforming our declining high streets and tackling homelessness, I see how the devolution proposals will help us tackle them for good. And it does it in three main ways: allowing greater strategic oversight, greater collaboration, and also greater powers. In terms of greater strategic oversight, the devolution bill aims to transfer power out of Westminster through the rollout of more directly elected mayors. For too long, the South East region has missed out on having a seat at the negotiating table with government to advocate for our region's needs. The South East has a population of almost 10 million people and has lacked the representation other regions have had to push for greater investment, integrated transport and high-quality jobs of the future. A directly elected mayor for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will provide the regional strategic oversight we've been missing, to speak out for the challenges our cities, towns and villages face and ensure our areas get the investment and the support they need to thrive. The government has made clear that mayors will be hardwired into the fabric of government, leading the way on housing, planning, transport, skills and more. This will end the destructive, Whitehall knows best mindset that micromanages the decision-making of councils like our own. In terms of greater collaboration, the proposals for local government reorganisation encourages councils to work together to tackle common problems, collaborate and find solutions, rather than us pitting against our neighbouring authorities for ever-diminishing pots of funding. Instead, addressing the big local and regional challenges we face becomes a joint endeavour with equal partners side by side. And I think residents want to see more of this type of collaboration. So many in Portsmouth work and study in neighbouring towns and cities, and too much of their time is currently spent stuck in traffic on motorways, unable to rely on public transport because the trains often take longer than driving, and catching the bus outside of our city can be expensive and complicated. So if you ask any resident in Portsmouth if they'd welcome a transport system like London on their doorstep to give them the confidence to leave their car at home, or consider getting rid of it entirely because public transportation is so cheap and reliable, I know they would say yes. This would mean more cars off our roads, less traffic and pollution, and us making greater headway to achieve net zero carbon emissions. Then in terms of greater powers, the devolution proposals empower communities to transform their neighbourhoods, high streets and important community assets. So that means greater powers for councils and greater power for the people. Mayors will be able to take buses back into public control quickly and more simply, building on the incredible work in Greater Manchester with the B network, the work in West Yorkshire and the Liverpool City region. Mayors will have a new statutory role in governing, managing, planning and developing the rail network, with an option to have greater control over local rail stations to make this a reality. Portsmouth residents will have the chance to co-design their transport with elected leaders. This is a really exciting opportunity for all of us. The devolution plans aim to empower communities to shape the future of their areas, including through strong new right-to-buy rights to rescue much-loved community assets. And if we think about the decline in the high street and the impact this has on our local economy and the morale of our city, the devolution proposals aim to give back power to councils to transform our high streets for good. This includes greater planning powers, a greater ability to CPO empty shops, and ensure empties are let out in the short term. Again, tackling one of the biggest concerns residents have about our city. And if we look to the evidence about what other metro mayors have achieved, we will all come to the same conclusion, that devolution is a positive thing. So whether that's Andy Burnham, who's relentlessly focused on initiatives to tackle rough sleeping, which has seen homelessness rates decline in Manchester, or Sadiq Khan's rollout of free school meals for primary school children in London, helping to tackle poverty and inequality. And this isn't just about party political point scoring and bigging up the work of Labour mayors, because actually Conservative mayors have been effective during their tenure too. So Andy Street, as the first mayor of West Midlands, secured significant investment in the region with an estimated 10 billion brought in during his tenure, and the establishment of the West Midlands as a hub for business innovation. So this type of regional leadership presents huge opportunities for Portsmouth, our local economy and our residents' quality of life. Not to mention increased levels of funding, more integrated funding streams and saving money for the taxpayer by simplifying local government structures. More and larger unitary authorities will make councils more effective, sustainable and streamlined, and there'll be the introduction of multi-year financial settlements, shifting to a fairer system which matches funding with need, and a proper partnership between central and local government. So we hope that Cabinet will support the recommendation to apply for the National Devolution Priority Programme, and we ask for the administration to continue to take this cross-party collaborative approach in developing the plans. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Charlotte. George?
Thank you, Leader. Similar to the Labour group, our colleagues in Portsmouth Independent Party do support the recommendations today. And we welcome them. I think, you know, less scripted than the last, but I think that there needs to be a very clear... We spoke to a number of residents, first of all, and there's mass confusion between the devolution and local government reorganisation, and I think that a lot of us have maybe stumbled across that with our residents. We need to ensure, as a council, from a comms perspective, that the messaging is very clear on the differences between the two so that there's no ambiguity. And I feel often that at the moment, with the two schemes running parallel to each other at the moment, that there is serious risk for confusion between those two and what they mean. And I often think if it's complicated for us to understand some things, it's even more complicated for non-political minds to understand some things. Although we obviously support the recommendations, I do feel that obviously we're kind of, it's a bit strange to be having to agree to something prior to actually having the questions to the to the questions that we have. You know, there is outstanding things such as we don't know what's happening to the debt of other councils. You know, we don't know what's happening to the current structures and the rules and the regulations that we've passed and the guidances and the local licensing plans. All these questions I feel should have been answered in a nice world before we have to make a decision. So it's a real shame that we're in a position as a council to have to make a decision to go on to a priority programme, and our back's been essentially put up against the wall to say, if you don't take this route, we're going to do it for you regardless, but we're not actually going to answer any of the questions that you need to have the answers to prior to agreeing to it. So we're essentially writing a blank cheque, in my opinion, which is not something I am comfortable or I like, and I don't think anybody here necessarily does. I'm not too positive personally, as positive as the Labour group about the outcome. I think there is certainly benefits of it, and I hope, I'm very, optimistic that it will be successful. But as I say, separating the two, I think our group, after talking, would have preferred a Solent deal, but obviously that's out the window now. So we will take obviously a Hampshire and Isle of Wight deal, because why wouldn't we? But I think the local government reorganisation does make our group feel slightly uncomfortable at this stage. And I say they're the two separate things that we need to discuss. I don't like the uncertainty about the election process timescales. I think that the current proposal of us having to stand 3 times in 3 years is a bit silly if the current procedures go ahead. I don't like the fact that we don't have answers to say to the debt. I think that's a real serious thing that we need to know the answer to. I don't like the uncertainty about what authorities that we're combining with and how that's going to be linked together. So I think, as I say, that is what unsettles our group, not necessarily the devolution, but the local government restructuring. And I do believe, actually, like myself, the leader is a true Pompey person, and like a lot of us in this room will definitely put Portsmouth first. And I'm glad that we've got a pro-Pompey person leading us into this decision-making process. But as I say, that's all I wanted to say. Our group do support it. I think it's a horrible decision to have to make so quickly, but we will support the administration in any way we can through that process. And like Councillor Gerrard said, I really do appreciate the current cross-party working relationship that we've got on this, and I hope that continues. Thank you.
Thank you, George, and I can assure you it will. I'm just minded that we've got other members who've taken the trouble to come along today, and although they're not on the deputations list, it's within my gift to give an offer of anyone else who wishes to contribute the opportunity to do so. Councillor Jeffrey, would you like to say anything?
Not at the moment, but if the offer's open later, I might.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Vallerley? No? Councillor Smythe?
Not at the moment. Having been through this once or twice and having been chair of the health authority that was sub-regional, I'm extremely interested in this, and I welcome the opportunity to be involved and possibly even use some of my experience in literally facilitating this sort of thing elsewhere. But I don't have any comments at the moment, and I'm very happy with the recommendation.
Okay. Before we go into debate, any questions of either Natalie or Paddy about any of the detail that's involved with this from anyone, including group leaders? Councillor Hunt.
Will there be any kind of referendum paid for by the government to decide on this, so that Portsmouth residents actually get to have a say about whether they want either of these changes?
So there won't be a referendum. So what we are aware of is that the consultation, so if we're chosen to go forward for the devolution priority programme, the government will run a fairly rapid consultation process, and we expect that to start in sort of February time. They are very clear that that is not a referendum. They are looking for feedback from stakeholders, from ourselves and other parties in that process, but they're very clear it's not a yes or no, do you support this? They're looking for general feedback. So that's for the devolution part of it, in terms of obviously setting up a strategic authority. In terms of the local government reorganisation plans, we expect those to happen in summertime 2026. It's not clear whether or not we will oversee that process or whether the government will oversee that process. The difference with this devolution programme compared to previous ones, if I just go back to the consultation this year, is that previous ones were run by local authorities where they put their bids forward to central government to be considered, but the government are going to centralise that consultation process this time and will report back to us what the results of it will be. And I think it's just something under the legislation that they are required to consult, but they are very clear in a call that we were on yesterday, they were very clear it's not a referendum.
So the government will not allow any resident in Portsmouth do have a say on whether they wish to make this change or not. Is that correct?
Well, I think they're inviting comment. That is the consultation process, but they're not. They're what they are very clear. It's not a yes or no. Do you support having a strategic authority for this area or an elected mayor for this area? It is general consultation. So Portsmouth residents can say they might not support it. I'm not sure how that will sort of weigh out with all of the rest of the consultation responses. It's a consultation exercise the government have to do under legislation, but we are still working through a lot of this in terms of the detail coming through on a daily basis.
So, if I may, Leader. So this is a done deal even before we vote tonight. Is that correct?
Well, it's not a done deal because we still have to be selected to be part of the devolution priority programme. So the government has said anybody who wants to be on that priority programme, you have to submit by the 10th of January, which is this Friday, and from those submissions they will select which areas are put forward to be on that first tranche of devolution proposals.
So with all the votes that have gone on around the county, I believe Hampshire Council meeting tonight, but all the rest, the indications are that Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and Southampton are all going to sign up to this, and that even if here tonight we said we didn't want to in this cabinet, we would still have it imposed upon us.
I think we all have to agree to submit something, but what the government has been very, very clear about is that they have got the ability of a ministerial direction, that if you do not agree, so the government is clear it doesn't want to leave any orphan areas out of a devolution deal. So if we say we don't want to do this, there will be a ministerial direction to say, well, the rest of your area is, so we are forcing your hand to be part of it. And that's been a very, very clear message from MHCLG and ministers that we've had the conversations with. And that's referred to in the white paper, that the government will have those tools at their fingertips to be able to implement some of this.
Thank you. I think we got to where we want, and that's a shotgun wedding.
Okay, members' question. Darren first.
Thanks, Steve. Just one, which is in this consultation, will the council be expected to support the devolution proposals, or would it stay neutral?
So the conversation that we've had with MHCLG is that the reason they will do the consultation centrally, i.e. local authorities not delivering it, is that it will allow local authorities to put their own responses into that process. Whereas if you were delivering that process, it means you were a little bit sort of restricted in what you could say. So it gives us the ability to make comment on it. They haven't said, you know, whether or not they're expecting us to support it or not. I mean, the fact we're taking a decision through this evening, it might look a bit strange if we then change our mind, but it's there for us to put in a response if we want to.
Okay. George?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, a couple of questions for either Natalie or Paddy. Just so picking up on Lee's point, if we're not then selected for the priority scheme, what's then the timescales in comparison to the priority? Is if we got a different process if we're not selected within that scheme?
So we're not aware of what the other timetables are. So the big push has been for the priority programme, but there will be other tranches of devolution deals that come through over the next 4 or 5 years. They haven't released any of those timetables. I don't know, Paddy, I'm just looking at Paddy. I don't think we've been made aware of any other timetables other than the one for the priority programme.
That's right, although they have been very clear that they do want to cover the whole country within the next few years, so the expectation is that it will be happening in any case, and as was said, that actually if you don't put forward a proposal or the proposal doesn't meet the criteria, there will be a ministerial directive to do one. You just won't get the benefits of being in the early part with the resource that's available for that.
And 2 final questions, quick ones, if that's okay, Leader. In relation to the comms, is there any plans to come up with a kind of simplified web page on Portsmouth City Council's perspective that us as councillors and elected officials could direct local residents to? I'm not expecting War and Peace, and I don't want War and Peace, but I want a simple this is what it is, this is what it means. And obviously with the ambiguity at the bottom of this is still an ongoing developing situation, so this may change, and a page that we can update, because as I say, certainly in the last 24 hours I've been tagged in 3 things, and it'd be nice just for us all to have a universal, non-political method of just sending them to the correct information. So is that something that our comms team could potentially work on?
Yes, certainly. And we've just had a conversation about comms, because obviously if we're all doing this together as of Friday, we need to make sure that there are internal discussions or communications and external and communications with members, some of our stakeholders externally. What does it mean? And obviously it's going to be an iterative process as we go through it if we are chosen to be on that priority programme. But absolutely, maybe some landing pages where we can where you can signpost residents to say this is what it's about. But obviously, as I've said, they're 2 different things. Local government reorganisation is different to devolution, but they are running in parallel and there are points of crossover. But we could probably explain that more clearly in some simple, plain English on some web pages.
I think that'd be nice, because directing people to the white papers, it might be a bit of, and my very last quick point, if you don't mind.
Just quickly on that second point that you made, I called Lee Todd this afternoon, and I know that he's got a meeting scheduled with Natalie and Paddy, I think, or they're putting it in the diary for that exact reason, so that we can make sure we do that.
Yeah, it'd be really useful, and I think it'd just be nice for us all to be united on a source of information that we can direct people to, because I think for certainly a challenging and difficult and quite emotive thing, and as we all know, it's probably going to get more emotive as it goes down the line, because it'll have more national media press pick up. So anything we can do to have the same narrative that goes forward to avoid confusion would be appreciated. And the last point, I know this was picked up yesterday, but just for the avoidance of doubt for anybody watching, obviously we're a unitary authority. The white paper stated that successful unitary authorities wouldn't necessarily be put into local government reorganisation. I know that obviously the leader and the chief exec has approached the ministers and clarified the position, and we've been told no, we must. But I think just for the public record, it'd be useful to know what the chief executive is planning to do in relation to asking questions of the ministers of why we've been selected to be told that we're in this local government reorganisation scheme, whereas smaller unitary authorities than ours have not been told that they can be there. And so just for public record, I think it'd be great to have an answer on that, and how we're going to challenge that, or at least get an answer for that. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so we did ask that very specific question because the white paper was a little bit ambiguous about we were a small authority, but actually we're functioning well, our finances are fine, so therefore we're not in this failing category. We asked that very specific question, but it was very, very clearly put back to us that you are too small. You need to be something that withstands financial shocks, that can look at your capacity, that can look at your efficiencies working over a bigger space, and that's why this figure of 500,000 people is referred to in the white paper. So the Minister McMahon, sent letters to unitary authorities and to neighbouring district and borough areas where they felt that we did not meet that criteria. And we did challenge that criteria. The leader did challenge that criteria with ministers and said, no, you were definitely caught, and therefore you need to work with your adjoining district and boroughs and grow your size accordingly. We do know there are some exceptions, and again, the leader pushed back on that because I think Greater London and the London boroughs, some of Berkshire, for example, they didn't receive letters, and some of those authorities are much smaller than Portsmouth City Council. So we've tried on several fronts, but the feedback from MHCLG and civil servants and ministers has been consistent. No, you are too small. You have to grow. So that's the position we've been told several times.
Judith, I thought, was that it, George? Sorry. George, was that your third one? Yeah. Judith, I think you had your hand up.
Just a couple of questions. I don't know what you can say about this, but what do we know about what the surrounding authorities, the districts and boroughs surrounding, but also Southampton? And in your introduction on Monday, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole was mentioned. Do we know what they're thinking, and do we know what the consequences of any decision made by the Hampshire group, if you like, would be received if there's sort of frayed edges on either side, Dorset or West Sussex? What do you know about that?
Is this with regards to devolution or local government reorganisation?
Either. I accept that they're different, although I presume one of our aims is to bring that together so as not to have to do the whole thing twice. But
yeah, so with regards to devolution, the government's quite clear about other boundaries that we work within. So looking at those very strategic boundaries, so Hampshire's a fairly good fit in terms of a number of our other services. If you start to stray into other areas, I think there are other complications around that natural fit, around how other health providers, police providers, etc., they all cross over into different geographies. So I think there is a general preference certainly from the civil servants about trying to keep that sort of coterminous within the county boundaries because everything else is. With regards to local government reorganisation, it's really too early to really comment on how this is landing. It's very, very new, and local authorities are only just processing this now about what some of the ramifications of that is. But, you know, I think we are keen that if this is the direction we're being told we have to work in, otherwise there is legislation that pushes in a particular way, we will endeavour to do it to make sure we get the best outcomes for our local people and those in the surrounding areas if it has to get bigger. That has to be the end goal, about making sure that our residents benefit, our businesses benefit, and actually we get more investment into this area to sort out some of our problems, particularly those, if you look at the white paper, it talks about inequalities and deprivation and funding that might come alongside that. So it's how we then spend the next several months. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of time, but to get our best case put together so we can make the best case of a new area going forward.
The Hampshire authorities are all thinking in the same sort of way, are they, or we're not able to say yet?
We don't know.
We don't know. This is new. It came out on the 16th of December. We've had Christmas and New Year in between it. So this was, as you know, this was an extra meeting. We've all put extra meetings in this week for the upper tiers. All the district and boroughs are still processing this, and obviously those arrangements, what the ramifications might be.
That makes sense, but that was the sort of thing that we will need to know, all of us, quite soon as we know, because nobody wants to be backing something that's going to fall at the first hurdle.
No, but ironically it could, because there are meetings this week where we just don't know what the outcome's going to be. So we've all had to grab the slot that was available, and the Isle of Wight's meeting's happening right now, same time as ours, and the counties is happening in the next couple of days. So we are where we are. We haven't even had an opportunity to get the leaders across Hampshire together to have any kind of discussion before the government's deadline. I'll have a lot more to say about this in a minute, Judith. A lot more. Lee?
Thank you for being so clear about what is happening. It's very, very clear, and thank you for that. Arising out of Paddy May's answers just now, what exactly is the benefit or benefits of joining this fast-track initiative to do the elected Lord Mayor? What are the benefits? Do you know?
So the benefits that we are aware of for the priority programme is that being in the first tranche, there will be more funding that will be available from the Treasury in terms of capacity funding to actually get this off the ground. This is a huge thing for us as local authorities if all the costs fell to us. The actual enablement costs to do it are significant. The resources to do it are massive. So the government is offering for those kind of early adopters that go along this route a share of some funding that will be allocated from the Treasury. The later you go down that line, and this is what the civil servants have been informing us, the later you go down that line when the Treasury allocates the money, there is more uncertainty about actually whether you can get hold of any of money to do any of the capacity building that's required. So that's one of the big things about actually this funding that the government are saying is there for those that want to go early. The danger if you go further down the line or in the last tranche, whenever that might be, is that actually you're having to fund the costs yourself, which is obviously not an attractive option for, I think, any of the local authorities in the area to do. So that's one of the main kind of catalysts or the sweeteners to try and go early, is to do that. There is also a reference around, it was a little bit confusing in terms of some of the government's kind of feedback around the giving you more time for local government reorganisation.
Yes, I understand that part. So, again, you've been very clear. If we don't do it now and we do it later, there'll be money to do it now, but the taxpayer of Portsmouth will have to pay for it, probably, themselves, later on. And that's a gun to your head, isn't it?
I think possibly that's right. I don't know whether there's going to be future money coming from the Treasury. I think it's a bit of a crystal ball for us to predict if there's going to be more money. We don't know that. But also, if we choose not to go into something and the rest of the authorities around us choose to do so, this is where the ministerial direction will kick in and that we will be forced to do something. So there is something to consider as politicians about, is it something you want to be in control of your own destiny, or is it something that you want to be forced upon you in terms of, if Portsmouth don't play with this and they don't want to create these white spaces or these orphan spaces, they will force us into something. So there's something about being in control of the process.
Yeah, I don't think we're in control of the process at all, myself. Government are entirely in control of this process, and if we don't go along with it, they are going to make us pay for it. I get that very clearly. The one thing I wanted to ask was about the ministerial directive. If there is a ministerial directive imposed on, let's say, Portsmouth or Southampton, I presume then they'll make us pay for not doing it voluntarily, let's say.
I don't know the detail on that, no.
But we don't know. We don't know very much about very much. All right.
Any more questions? Charlotte, sorry.
Just a question about the boundary review. I know obviously we only had a briefing 2 days ago, so I don't expect too much to have changed since then. But just to Councillor Madrick's point about obviously trying to avoid multiple elections year after year, I just wondered if we knew any more about whether or not the boundary review was going to happen in Portsmouth or not.
The position hasn't changed. We've asked them twice. We asked them after the white paper came out. We asked them, I think it was last week, Ian Fitchett also wrote to them to say we're in the middle of this process. If we have mayoral elections in 2026, and we've got our all-out elections, if we follow through with our boundary review proposals, there is the possibility that if we have shadow unitary authority elections in 2027, there's another election, and then there'll also be the year 2 of after our all-outs of councillors voting or being voted in for 1 year. So theoretically 3 elections, and we have put that to them to say this doesn't quite make sense. In terms of public money, but also in terms of, I know there'll be challenges for yourselves as politicians to field candidates and all the rest of it in that short period of time. Their position is that we are going to keep with the plan until we hear otherwise. They are aware of the white paper. They are in conversation with MHCLG. I asked the very specific question on this yesterday in a chat with the Minister, and I think the response we got back was we are aware of this and we will be working with the Boundary Commission going forwards, because we know there are capacity issues there. So they would have to create a lot more capacity in the Boundary Commission to be able to deal with all of this reorganisation all at once. So whether they start to face some of that, we don't know. There are many questions that probably lots of local government authorities have got for the government at the moment about this. I think they're sort of feeling their way a little bit through some of it. We get a little bit more clarity every single time we have a conversation with government officials, but the boundary review's position is we'll press on until we hear otherwise.
Mad. Okay, I think I'm just going to final check. Any more questions? And then I'm going to go into debate with the Cabinet on this. Lee.
No questions. Can I go first? Is that all right? Okay. So, Leader, this is a...
Lee, you don't have to stand up. It's not full house. Okay.
I'm going to stand. It's very important. It's very important. Do you know, I just find it incredible, Leader, that the one institution that stuck and held everything together during the turmoil of COVID and the issues with the NHS was local government. And now this government, this increasingly autocratic government, is intending to send local government into turmoil and chaos. I want to say about Portsmouth, I mean, some of you may not know, but I'm going to cut out some of what I've done to save time. But Portsmouth is her own self. she kept, here in Portsmouth, she kept Cromwell at bay. She kept the Nazi bombers. She stood up to the Nazi bombers. So ours is a great and unique city. And in 1997, she broke away from Hampshire. And I know that because I was part of the consultation and all the residents' meetings and the public meetings, because in 1997 I got involved in politics. And the reason I got involved was the excitement of Portsmouth looking after itself, herself. So I attended lots of community meetings, church halls, a whole range of consultation exercise, and people overwhelmingly were excited and wanted Portsmouth to do Portsmouth's own thing. This change excited the city. And suddenly there we were, running everything ourselves. Of the people, for the people, and by the people of Portsmouth. Not Hampshire, or Winchester, or Havant, or Gosport telling us what to do, but our residents being elected to express the wishes of Portsmouth. And held to account by people here. Real power in the hands of Portsmouth residents from here. Now we have this increasingly, in such a short space of time, this increasingly autocratic government about to take all of that away from Portsmouth and the residents here, without asking anyone, consulting and so on, but we know exactly they've made a decision. We know that. And in this shotgun wedding, these Whitehall autocrats have decided that we should marry up with places that have nothing in common with our city's culture and heritage. We are to be forced to accept an arranged marriage with Southampton, Winchester, and further afield, Basingstoke, Andover, and Fleet and Aldershot in the north. And what a stormy relationship that is going to be with Hampshire North. With the Hampshire North economy seeking partners in London and Thames Valley, whilst here in the south, on the south coast, we will be looking at the south coast economy with partners from Bournemouth and elsewhere along the coast and Southampton. Our economy is a maritime and creative industries economy, a huge visitor economy from the New Forest across to Hayling Island. It is a very, very different economy to what goes on in the north of Hampshire, which looks to London-based, a London-based economy. It's just that these London-based ministers sat in their ivory towers are colouring in maps. That's all they're doing, is colouring in maps so that they look good on their walls. I've seen all this before, and we're going around and around and around again. Business, culture, heritage, innovation have no boundaries. They will succeed, probably without politicians, quite frankly. Places and people and communities have an identity. Portsmouth has her own identity. This so-called elected mayor is nothing of the sort. This will be an elected bureaucrat. These mayors have little or no power. So-called mayors have little or no power. Indeed, only recently, the London School of Economics has said that these mayors should be given more powers. But of course, government is too frightened to do that. It's a sop. They're there to take the heat when things go wrong. And it's a person which more power will be concentrated. And that sounds like, contrary to what I said just now. But it will be more power concentrated in the hands of one person. That to me is not democracy. That is not liberal. And the government will say that they want to consult these people who purport to represent the whole of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, I don't know, maybe Bournemouth, I'm not sure. This is an extra layer of governance. It is not needed here. Since 1997, Portsmouth has grown as a city, a vibrant place with a Pompey buzz unique to itself. It has a profitable green port, bringing in millions of pounds into the local economy. A port that Portsmouth residents and taxpayers have invested huge amounts of money to build and evolve this gateway to Europe. A city that since 1997 has turned itself around, utilised and invested in her creative and heritage and visitor economy, attracting world-class acts, music and world-class sports with all the jobs and regeneration that brings. And I heard about strategy earlier on. We have the sea defences, the coastal sea defences. What a great example of councils working together without the need for an elected bureaucrat telling them what to do. They're doing it already. A world-class university, pushing up standards, investing in facilities, science and technology, and all the economic benefits that that brings too. And you know what, members? Portsmouth has done all of this and much more on her own. She does not need to be married off to other suitors in pursuit of a dowry. Portsmouth has managed her own money and kept her bank account straight, whilst others all around face letters from the bank daily. None of that here, not a whiff of it. Yet we have to be married off to other people, presumably to bail out the fact that they've got it rather wrong. But they actually haven't got it rather wrong. What's gone wrong is that successive governments have failed to fund local government. That's why it's a mess, and this is a sop. So when they put all these people together to bail one another out, if the funding doesn't increase, which it won't, we've been made very clear, nothing's going to change. So we'll be robbing from Peter to pay Paul. But this administration does have a clear message. On the second part of this shotgun wedding, local government reform, I am sure that we will resist on behalf of the people of Portsmouth from being forced into a relationship with Havant, Gosport and Fareham, who do not want to do this either, so far as I understand. Even though we love them very much, Portsmouth wishes to remain the mistress of her own affairs. And as the leader has already said on the front page of the news, thank you, Toby, hands off Portsmouth. Let's tell these autocratic Labour ministers, hands off Portsmouth. And I know that the residents of Portsmouth, despite what the Labour leader of the group has said here, will agree with us. They will not agree with her.
Thank you, Lee. Who wants to go next? Darren.
Thanks very much, Steve. What's in front of us is actually quite technical. But what we're discussing really isn't, because it's about what got us, all of us, regardless of party, into politics to do. Make our area better, make our city better, make people's lives better. And those must be the tests against which this council and this city must judge Labour's plans for change. And there are three aspects to them before us today. And the first is devolution. Now, it's part of my DNA as a Liberal Democrat that power should leave London. We are the most centralised country in Europe, probably the most centralised country in the world outside of the old Soviet Union or what America will be under Donald Trump, I don't know. But it's welcome that Labour now agrees. Now, I think it's not enough. We should have more control over our health service, for instance. But I agree with, I can't really top Councillor Gerardo's explanation of the rationale behind it. And I think that's very helpful. It's also in my DNA that concentrating power is bad. History says putting power in the hands of one person does not end well. We can spend all day listing the wars it started, for instance. Less starkly, but more relevantly, 2 of the 10 or so current English mayors are in special measures. That is not a good sign. Believing one person can decide for 2 million people, which is what Labour wants here, is crazy. And it's because of that that I very similarly to Councillor Hunt, have always believed that Portsmouth should be its own combined authority. Power over the homes we build, power over the transport we have, power over the employment we need, power over the skills we need to boost our economy. All the things Councillor Girardi rightly raised in her deputation should be ours, not anyone else's. But successive central governments have just rejected that. The Tory government rejected that 4 years. I did hope for better from Labour, but its manifesto, and so its mandate, having won the election, is clear. Large authorities led by mayors. Given that we've now had the second best option, which was something based on the Solent economic area ruled out by the government, we should back the plans that have been given to government and get on with it as soon as possible. Now, I do agree with Councillor Madrick, George Madrick, about the confusion between devolution and reorganisation, and the truth, as the so many I don't knows that have been uttered in this meeting this evening testify, is that advice changes every day. It changes from ministers every day. It changes from civil servants every day. Even worse, different people say different things at different times. Now, that's bad for this council and the staff that we, all 42 of us, oversee. It's bad for this city, and most importantly, it's bad for the people who put us here. But the two things are separate, and so my reviews reflect that. Now, Labour does have a mandate for devolution. It does have a mandate for mayors. It does not have a mandate for its plans to scrap Portsmouth. It doesn't. It's not in Labour's manifesto. If it were, life would have been a bit easier, but it's not. And I do disagree with Councillor Girardi that, it will benefit, that these plans will benefit our city. We left Hampshire because we wanted to control our destiny. Labour wants to stop that. The Chief Executive is not quite right about who has told us this, because it's Labour ministers, not just government departments, who've told us this as well. Labour's plans for a shotgun marriage are bad for our city and bad for its people. And so, as Lee has said slightly more eloquently than I have, we have 3 words for the Labour Party in the Labour government: hands off Portsmouth. We can run ourselves very well, thank you. The alternative is the uncertainty Councillor Madrick has outlined, and something we face every day. And I'll be particularly interested about what happens to Plymouth, which is an authority like us, well run. It's a Labour authority and it is well run. They've stopped knocking trees down overnight, which is a good thing. And it's a well-run authority, and I want to see their outside a combined authority, indeed a team, Devon and Torbay, who had plans for a combined authority, plans to merge before all this happened. And I want to see what happens to them. I'll be very interested if they, as a well-run, Labour-run authority, are told, don't worry, you're fine, and us, as a well-run Lib Dem authority, are told, no, you have to have a shotgun wedding. I'll be keeping an eye on that. But our final aspect is around something that doesn't actually affect us, but it's our experience of leaving Hampshire that I think allows us to comment on whether the county has to delay its elections in May. Now, I know the Tories and Labour want them postponed for a year to allow the consultation that the Chief Executive mentioned to take place. Well, we've checked, and even if it starts on the last Monday this month, that will end before their pre-election period. We also know from a ministerial briefing yesterday that those who do not delay elections may have more flexibility on when they deliver their shotgun marriage plans. If Hampshire delays this for a year, it also means there is no smooth and stable transition to whatever the future holds. Achieving that needs political leaders without distractions. The number of questions: where are you based? Who's in charge? Where are the staff? Oh, what council allowances exist as well? All that sort of stuff has to be decided. And you need people whose sole focus is that. You might get away with electing a third or half a council, but having everyone scrambling for votes for a year or so is madness. And I hope that our colleagues in Hampshire County Council think the same. So this isn't where we want to be. We want this city to decide its own future. Unfortunately, Tory and Labour governments have denied us that. So we should crack on so we can shape things as far as we can, as far as devolution is concerned. And as for the rest, Labour should keep their hands off our city. Shotgun marriages are for others, not here. Thank you, Steve.
Darren, who's next? Matthew?
Oh, go on then. You've twisted my arm, leader. So, Devolution. This goes back quite a few years. We've had proposals, more proposals, proposals that have fallen down, proposals that come back, different proposals, proposals that have no mandates from former leaders of Hampshire County Council. And now we're here. And we're here because, as Councillor Sanders has said, the government has a mandate for this. For the first time ever, this is the first time we've ever had something that says the whole of England should have, well, combined authorities, it said in the manifesto, but we now must call them strategic authorities. Authorities which will have similar powers to that in Manchester and the West Midlands. Authorities that will have to be at least 1.5 million people. That is the direction we set. That's why we can't have a Solent authority, which ourselves, Isle of Wight and Southampton have been working towards for many, many years. And we can't have an authority with no mayor because everyone has to have a mayor. That is what was in their manifesto. That is what is proposed. Now, I don't like mayors. I don't like anything presidential. I think it's poor for democracy and it's poor for governance. Indeed, we have had mayors that have been got rid of, not least in Liverpool and in Bristol. In Bristol, they had a referendum and they said, we don't want a mayor anymore. And that came because the council said, we don't want a mayor anymore. And that was a good move because it puts it back into the proper way of governance, which is the parliamentary way of governance that we have in the United Kingdom, almost everywhere, apart from for these things like, for the odd mayors in certain local authorities and in the current combined authorities where they say you have to have a mayor. We talk to local government colleagues. Virtually no one wants a mayor, anywhere. I think Councillor Gerard is in a very, very, very small minority of wanting a mayor. Virtually nobody does. You talk to colleagues around the country from all parties and they don't want mayors. But that is what we are being offered. Now, we could stick our heels, we could stick our fingers in our ears and say, we don't like this, we don't want this, we can't, we don't do that. The reality is this is going to happen. And if we do not agree to it and we don't go forward for this priority programme, much worse things can happen to Portsmouth because things will be done to us that we lose control of. Indeed, looking at some of the places around the country, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton, having these meetings this week, we are unusual that we are actually doing this work this week and getting this done by Friday to do this priority programme. There are many areas of this country whereby they seem to be doing the fingers in the ear thing. That they haven't had proper conversations with their neighbours. They haven't come up with a plan. They've spent this very short period of time, because it is an incredibly short period of time, not having the right conversations, and they're in positions whereby they are probably going to be done to. And as Councillor Sanders mentioned about Devon, and I'm also very interested to see if Plymouth gets an exception to join other exceptions. I'll come to those in a minute. But the latest I've heard is that Exeter want to be a unitary on their own. I'm sure Ipswich will probably want to be a unitary on their own, as will Norwich. All Labour-run authorities knowing that if they expand, they will have not a catch-hell chance of ever running a 500,000 unitary authority. But in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton, we have an opportunity to get on with things in terms of having a devolution deal And combined with that, as all the information we've been given from ministers, well, generally, is that if you put that forward now, it means that it's a later thing on doing local government reorganisation. And that gives us more power to have control over our destiny. So let's look at local government reorganisation and why it's bad for Portsmouth to go elsewhere. Portsmouth is a well-run authority. It is one of the authorities in the country that has less financial issues than many others. We do not have tens of millions of pounds of savings to find in year, like other places do, not least our neighbours in Hampshire, 170 plus million pounds that they have to find to sort out their financial crisis. And within the information that we were given from a meeting that the leader of the council and the chief executive was on, where many questions were asked, there was a transcript from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government that came back. And it's a very interesting responses to these questions. Because one thing that comes up 3 times are these exact words: we will prioritise the delivery of high quality and sustainable public services to citizens and communities above all other issues. I'll repeat this. We will prioritise the delivery of high quality and sustainable public services to citizens and communities above all other issues. That is repeated 3 times in response to different questions that were asked at that meeting. So if that's above all other issues, and we know in Portsmouth, we deliver high quality and sustainable public services to our citizens and communities, then what is the government playing at? By coming up with this 500,000 plucked out of the air, where unitaries that are over 500,000 around the country are often among those that are failing. Recent examples: Somerset. The 2 Northamptonshire authorities, taken over from a failing county council, the first one in the country that went bust. We have existing unitary authorities, which are called metropolitan boroughs. We have Birmingham, bust, biggest one in the country, bust. We have other authorities, like Cheshire East, bust. All of them over 500,000. Bigger doesn't mean sustainable. Sustainable is all about what is right for local things. Later on in the responses to questions, it says everything is on a case-by-case basis. Now, we might say, well, but it says 500,000, but then it says case-by-case basis. But we already know it's on a case-by-case basis, because we know that not a single London borough has been written to, saying that even the ones that border 2-tier authorities, so none of the ones that border Surrey, none of the ones that border Hertfordshire, none of the ones that border Essex, none of them have been told you have to look at merging and getting bigger and going to 500,000. We also know no metropolitan boroughs have had that. None of the metropolitan boroughs in Greater Manchester or Merseyside that border Lancashire. None of the South Yorkshire boroughs that border Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. None of them have been written to about having to get merged. And then the most egregious example of double standards is Berkshire. 6 local authorities in Berkshire, every single one of them is smaller than Portsmouth. Every single one of them borders 2-tier areas, either in Oxfordshire, Hampshire, or Surrey. All of them border two-tier areas, and yet not a single one of them has been asked to merge or get bigger or whatever there is. So you have to ask the question as to why is this going on? Devolution was in the manifesto. Devolution is clearly the priority for this government. And I can understand that. Don't like the scale, I don't like the powers that are coming down. To be honest, I would be much happier if we're talking about real devolution and we're talking about a federal system in the United Kingdom where the authorities, what we call strategic authorities, were actually regional assemblies, and we had real power come down from Whitehall to the same extent that we have in Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. But what we do have is we have an opportunity to take some powers down from central governments, which at least is something. But what we don't have is for sustainable, well-run local authorities to then be made unsustainable, potentially, by having to merge into places which don't want to do it back. Talking to our colleagues, why would our colleagues in our neighbouring authorities want to be part of an authority which is alien to them? Why would they if you talk to, as is common in a lot of outer areas where you've got a big urban centre like a Portsmouth or a Nottingham or a Leicester, one thing that the outer areas don't want to be done is ruled from that area. So it's a two-way process of having that. So it's a very interesting thing to have done. I think it seems to be a mistake the way that the government has gone around this. It has caused a lot of ructions, including within their own party. It's a time when things like social care have had the can kicked down the road until 2028, when there's been 25 different commissions, reports, proposed legislation, etc., done on social care in the last 27 years. I'm not really sure why you need another commission that's going to take 3 years to report. And I heard the minister say, the care minister say, it's because it needs to be done properly. Why there is such a rush to do things which are going to shape this country, English local governments, for decades forwards, and why they gave us less than a month to decide what we want to do. It seems like priorities are completely wrong. It hasn't been thought through properly, and the consequences, I think, could be very, very dire, especially if there are those shotgun weddings where it goes wrong, because we've seen in places like Somerset, which was against all the local authorities who wanted 2 unitaries there. They were all put together in one, and it is now a failing authority, an authority that is on the verge of a 114 direction. So I reluctantly support the recommendations, but as has been said so well by colleagues, as has been said very well by the leader in the media and elsewhere, hands off Portsmouth. We can run our own affairs, and going by the government's own words, it is for them to prove that that their way of doing things will prioritise delivery of high quality and sustainable public services to citizens and communities above all other issues, and they should tell us why Portsmouth isn't doing that now and can't do that well into the future.
Thank you, Matt. Any other members of the Cabinet wishing to make a statement of any description? No? Any final questions from anyone else? Nope. In that case, it's my go. So, we shouldn't be here today. We shouldn't be in this room having this meeting right now. The government should not have written to us on the 17th of December, having published their white paper the day before, demanding a response by the 10th of January, giving us only 16 working days to make decisions that will affect Portsmouth for decades to come. I know people right across local government who were forced to come in between Christmas and New Year to get all this sorted out when they'd pre-planned holidays and breaks, and that's just rude. Frankly, it's rude. So they should also not be holding a loaded gun to our head. And I know that this term shotgun wedding's been used a lot today. There is no better term to describe this and what is happening here. Threatening to use a ministerial direction to enforce its will on democratically elected local authorities with no meaningful consultation, and the only consultation they are going to have is the one they're going to run. They'd already removed our economic development budget, and you might not have noticed this, it was in the budget, that the money that we used to get, that used to support running the LEP, which we'd moved into the Solent Growth Partnership for Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight to work together around economic growth like we were flaming well told to, they took the money away. It's gone. So it's clear that coercion is their chosen method in achieving their aims. And it makes me very cross. Portsmouth has always said that we would welcome devolution, properly done devolution, as long as it was on a Solent geography. And the point Lee made was absolutely correct, is that the reason we asked for that is the functional economic area that is the Solent is totally different in character to the economic area of the north of Hampshire. My colleague, Paul Harvey, who's the leader of Basingstoke and Dean, has always been clear that they look north and they look east. They do not look south. But they're being forced to. So this is just not about what's being made to happen to Portsmouth. It's about what's being made to happen to everyone else as well. So we were clear about that, wanting the Solent geography, and we're clear that we didn't want an elected mayor to be included. And this wasn't something that just Portsmouth thought. This was something that had broad agreement across the Solent local authorities. Goes back a number of years. Now, both of these conditions have been completely ignored by the government. With a one-size-fits-all decision to fill in the gaps as England, as was referred to, we've seen it all before, somebody's got a map on the wall and they've got a colouring set for Christmas, and force every area into a combined mayoral authority with, we're told, 1.5 million residents, which appears to be an arbitrary target. We're not told why 1.6 million residents is worse than that or 1.4 million residents is better than that. We don't know. We have absolutely no clue. We're also denied, importantly, the possibility of the mayor being elected under anything other than first past the post as an electoral system, when until partway through the last government, that was an option. The last government took it away, and this government is pointedly refusing to reverse that decision. It should not, however, come as a surprise that a Prime Minister who is fundamentally opposed to proper representation of the people and has spoken out against electoral reform very publicly, including ignoring his own MPs, his own party conference and his own members, is determined to stick with a morally bankrupt electoral system whilst enforcing this new regime on local government. So we find ourselves in a place where if we are able to realise the benefits of devolution, then the only path available to us must include the whole of Hampshire County Council area as well as Southampton and the Isle of Wight. We don't have a choice. Over the last 7 months, unable to get the clarity we really needed on devolution from either the previous or this government, the 4 leaders of the councils have been working positively together in the event that this was where we ended up. Those discussions have been very helpful and have led to our joint submission via an expression of interest to government in September from Hampshire and the Solent. still seeking clarity, could we pursue a Solent-only deal? And since then, we've all been sat waiting for the white paper, which I will remind you was promised by the end of October and turned up the week before Christmas. Published, finally, on the 16th of December. Now that we have the certainty, those conversations will pay dividends as strong relationships have been formed, and we will, I'm sure, work closely to ensure that Hampshire and the Solent secure the very best deal from government that we possibly can. But isn't it ironic, colleagues, that a Liberal Democrat leader from Portsmouth, a Conservative leader in Hampshire, a Labour leader in Southampton and an independent leader on the Isle of Wight are able to sit in a room and behave like grown-ups and treat each other with respect, and yet the Labour government seems to know nothing of the same level of respect in its interactions with local government? The opportunity that devolution through a combined authority offers is to secure new and significant investment in economic growth. We cannot deny that. To seek investment into making us more sustainable, to work collaboratively on the big issues of health and care, to seek investment in our marine and maritime industries, our tourism, heritage, and as Councillor Hunt said, our cultural and creative industries, our tech and defence sectors, our high streets, and to have a strategic focus on housing and transport. All good things. We want to see investment in skills to create better jobs and improve aspirations, but above all, we want to tackle deprivation in all of its forms. We want to remove the office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and I would say that Donna Jones has been supportive of the devolution priority pathway that we're seeking to enter into tonight, and is seeking to work collegiately with the other upper tier local authorities in pursuing this option. So we want to roll that office into the mayoral responsibilities and transfer both those powers and the fire authorities into the mayoral role. Apart from anything else, it'll help save the taxpayers of Hampshire some money. However, we'll be working hard and very hard to ensure that the mayor will be accountable to the local authority leaders and will deliver on the priorities that we as local authorities set, not to their own agenda. Although not presented in either a collaborative nor respectful way, but as a fait accompli, we now have to work tirelessly to make it successful. Now, if this was the extent of the government's diktat, we could make this decision today with frustration and resignation, but also with that determination to make it a success. But that is not all they are proposing, as we know. Despite no mention of it in their manifesto, as we've heard from Matt, the Labour government have decided to include local government reorganisation as part of this. This means abolishing all the county and district councils in England, all of them, and creating new unitary authorities similar to the way Portsmouth is now. But with no consultation with the democratically elected leaders of those councils, no consultation with residents or other stakeholders, just a diktat to say it's going to happen. The Labour government has further instructed unitary councils like Portsmouth, who just happen to be adjacent to the county areas by an accident of geography, to expand from our current size to another apparently arbitrary figure of 500,000 people. And in the document that Matthew referred to, when people were asked why 500,000 people, all they did was repeat the exact wording that's in the white paper. No additional information, no interpretation, no attempt to explain anything, just repeat parrot fashion what's in the white paper, which incidentally is not legislation. It's an introductory discussion document, and it's being used in a way as if it was on the statute book. That's where we are now. We don't wait for debates through Parliament anymore. We don't wait for legislation to get passed, for it to go through the House of Lords, come back to the House of Commons, to have third readings, to go to committee. We just chuck out our white paper and say, this is what you're going to do, folks, whether you like it or not. The Labour government has further instructed unitary councils like Portsmouth to do this, and I'm really worried that that figure of 500,000 people, in our particular case, is going to trap us into an agreement where we have no choice but to do something that doesn't make sense for us and equally doesn't respect our neighbours and traps them into the same choice as well. And that's not fair. As Lee said, we've got nothing at all against Havant, Fareham and Gosport. We work very collegiately with them, particularly through things like the Partnership for South Hampshire. They do not want this either. I have spoken to them. They are being done to as well. We're being ordered, along with Southampton, as a unitary council, to expand. So I've spoken to the others around us. They don't want it to happen. I've spoken to other people across Hampshire who either lead or are opposition leaders in local government, and they're all in shell shock, the same as we are, want to know what the hell's going on. Why is this being railroaded through when it wasn't in the manifesto? Why are people not being consulted? Where do these arbitrary numbers come from? What about the particular special geographies? I mean, why on earth somebody who runs Southampton would know anything about the verderers in the New Forest is a complete mystery to me. But apparently they're going to have to learn flipping quick, because that's how they expand to 500, taking the New Forest and East Lee. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to tell me that we might end up with a future leader of Portsmouth City Council or Portsmouth and East Solent or Greater Portsmouth Council who wears a Southampton shirt and lives in Sedgensworth, I wish you good luck with the good members of the public who live in this city, because they won't have it. But we've been clear. They've told us what they want us to do. So whilst we have that very positive and constructive relationship with our neighbours, we all know that Hampshire County Council is moving inexorably towards bankruptcy. Dumping a big chunk of that problem on Portsmouth is totally unacceptable. There's been no clarity over the money, and my suspicion, I agree with you, George, is that this is a way of the government continuing to underfund local government, but hiding their responsibility for local government failure by making these new unitary councils slash the services that residents value as part of the process of reorganisation, so that they can say the decisions weren't theirs. It's cowardice. And if I am correct, this is a cynical and devious way to dodge the real issue, which is that local government is chronically underfunded in this country and needs money now. Not next year, the year after, or social care funded in 4 years' time. We need it now. It was promised. We were told that this would change. It's not changing quickly enough. The only extra money we've got is to help offset some of the tax increases that they've caused on local businesses and on the voluntary sector and on residents, which is inevitably going to push our costs up. So we're not gaining very much at all, I'm afraid. It's a bean to solve a problem. So, what we most definitely do not need is massive upheaval as employees across local government are uncertain of their futures, while work to keep delivering high-quality services gets diverted into delivering on the government's urgent demands, and local authorities waste vital energy on trying to work out how all this gets resolved in the timescales available. This would all be bad enough if it was over 5 to 7 years, but no. The government has decided that this shotgun wedding needs to be outlined in March and then wants detailed proposals in by May this year. They want elections to the new council in 2027, with it coming to full effect in 2028. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. This is what you're going to do. And you can develop your own proposals. Please develop your own proposals. And if you don't develop your own proposals, we'll just tell you what to do. Colleagues, I'm sorry, but this is completely insane. Do we have a choice? No. But they say if we don't do it voluntarily, they'll just do it to us. The only slight bit of breathing space we can create is if we join the priority list for combined authority, showing our intentions around devolution and buying ourselves more time and space to be able to make a very strong argument about why Portsmouth should be left alone to stay as it is, as the successful unitary authority that it currently is and has been for a long time. So this is where we find ourselves. We agreed to be fast-tracked in order to have a whole 8 to 9 months, lucky us, to work out the future of our region. How kind of them. The government is getting things badly wrong. They've scrapped the winter fuel payments without giving older people time to adjust to their budgets. They could easily have waited a year and given people time and said, by the way, this is the last time you'll be able to have this. Save a little bit of extra every month, but no, your money's gone just like that. They've retained the two-child cap, which I regard as insidious. They've abandoned the WASPy women, despite all being too keen to be seen supporting their cause whilst in opposition, including our MP for Portsmouth South, who must be very red-faced to have had his picture holding their pledge recirculating on social media recently. They've rushed through tax reforms on farms, needlessly affecting those which have been passed down through multiple generations, when that easily could have been put in as exemption. If this farm is being inherited for the third or fourth time, then that's it, it doesn't need to pay tax. Then you'd have cut the Clarksons of this world out of it straight away without any argument. So they're now also failing to deliver on Angela Rayner's promise made to me and local other authority leaders from around this country barely 5 months ago, to reset the relationship, we were told, with local government and restore respect and understanding. Instead, they're abolishing dozens of councils, impacting many more, without even so much as a conversation with them before announcing this is not a policy to be considered, it's a done deal, like it or not. Now, many years ago, a phrase was used which I find continually entering my thoughts in recent weeks. When you have a government elected by a minority of the electorate, but with a majority of the seats, you don't have a true democracy, you have an elective dictatorship. Colleagues, I commend the recommendation to enter the devolution priority path as realistically the only option available to us, but I hope that this government listens to not just me, but to council leaders across the country and starts to behave in a spirit of partnership, not dictatorship. The fight for Portsmouth begins. I wear a Team Portsmouth badge for a very good reason. So we are now at the recommendations. They are, and I'm going to do them not en masse, but one at a time, just to make sure we're very clear where we are. Portsmouth City Council should agree to be part of the Hampshire and Solent devolution agreement, thereby avoiding a ministerial direction for what a devolved area will look like. Are we agreed? Okay. B. We agree that Portsmouth City Council, alongside our partner upper-tier authorities in Hampshire and the Solent, should seek to be part of the National Devolution Priority Programme and submit a letter to Government to this effect. And I want to add, recognising that this will mean more support and more money coming into the devolved area, Anna. Are we agreed? C. We agree that, subject to the Government agreeing that Hampshire and the Solent should be part of the DPP, that Portsmouth will be asked to submit outline proposals for LGR in March and final proposals in the autumn. We're noting that rather than agreeing. That is my suggestion. Are we agreed? So we're noting C, Anna. D. We give delegated authority to myself and the Chief Executive to negotiate forward devolution and LGR discussions with other authorities and with the Government. As part of that, the starting position should be that the Government should keep its hands off Portsmouth and let the city remain a standalone unitary authority. Are we agreed with that amended wording, colleagues? E. We agree that further papers will come to Cabinet and Council where appropriate about progress in these policy areas, and I want to add in that all councillors will be briefed ahead of all key dates in the timetable. Are we agreed? In that case, we have agreed to the resolutions that we're asked to on the paper today, with some minor amendments for clarification that I've added. Darren?
I don't know whether we can do this, but I think it is relevant that we need to say that we need a smooth and stable transition to the future. So I don't know whether you'll be able to accept this, Leader, but I would want to add a further recommendation, which is that we recommend to our colleagues in Hampshire County Council that they do not delay their elections in May, but that if they feel they have to delay their elections in May, that they are delayed for a short period, ideally a couple of months or so. I really, really do worry that their focus will be on getting votes rather than working out the future, and that is not acceptable for us as partners.
I'll need a steer from Peter on that as to whether that's something that we are officially able to take a view on.
You can't control what they do.
No.
You can ask and you can say. You can't control the time.
No, that's what he's doing. We're asking. We're not.
Okay.
Okay, Peter's in agreement with that. Colleagues, do we agree? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and I know it's been quite a long time tonight, but it was important that we talk this through properly, and heaven knows where we're going next. Thank you.